Okay, I'm so sorry. Good evening, friends. Today we are starting with a session that is all about the topic under organization behavior, that is perception. Okay, so what we are going to run through today in a last minute revision kind of a session, we're going to explore again the concept of perception, then this process, then there are any factors influencing the perception, then there are what the different kinds of barriers that actually hinders our perception process, and then enhancing the perceptual skills. Yes, we have all those today to, have a look into it. Okay, so now when I'm talking about perception, so first of all, a very important quick thing that runs in our mind is whether perception has a definition or not. Yes, of course, it has a definition, it has a concept. So what is perception is all about? Okay, like suppose in the morning I just get up, so I see that across my window there is a very nice sunny day. The sun is just getting arised, and the night, that means the ambience is very different. You can hear the sound or whispering of different birds, different animals around you. Okay, a chirping, basically chirping of the birds, actually that would be the correct word for it. Okay, so I'm so sorry, I'm really sorry for this. Okay, so what is this all about? Okay, this is what we call it as stimulus around any person. Then as a person, as a human being, we accept the stimulus around our surrounding. Then we try to understand the meaning of this stimulus. Okay, that means you try to interpret the stimulus, and then you try to perceive it. So every morning now, I know one thing, that it will be sunny, lighted. Okay, it would be around close to 5:30 that the day has started. Okay, the sun haven't had arised, but the animals, they have awaked, or the birds have started chirping, and we have a very favorite voice in the morning, that is of hen. Okay, so this is how the perception is built about a morning, because of the stimulus around it. Okay, so this is just an explanation. Coming back to the proper definition, you can say that it is a process through which people actually receive and interpret information from the environment. Okay, then the other would be, it would be a way of forming impression about oneself, about other people's, and about the daily life experiences. So it serves as a screen or a filter through which information passes before it has any effect on a people. So perception are influenced by various factors, and since people behave according to this perception, the consequences of these differences, whatever they have, the background and everything, while they're utilizing it during interpretation, would be quite substantial in terms of what is going to happen next. Okay. Then we have a perception process. So basically we divide perception process into 3 stages. One is perceptual inputs. The other would be perceptual mechanism. Then the other would be, the last part would be the output. And then finally, on the basis of all these 3 stages, a behavior is built up. Okay. So we'll first explore what things we can include in perceptual inputs. So perceptual inputs would be number of stimuli that are constantly confronting by people in form of information, might be in form of objects, events, or other people, etc. in the environment. Okay, so like right now I just had a switch off some equipment, so you must have noticed that specific voice. Okay, or you can say that is a noise. So that is a stimuli again. Okay, like this is the perceptual inputs. Then there is a mechanism. When I talk about a mechanism, a person receives information. He tries to process that information through the process of selection, organization, and interpretation. Okay, so how we first select things for actually perceiving them. There are basically 2 different factors that plays a very important role when you talk about perceptual selectivity. Okay, perceptual selectivity refers to the tendency to select certain objects from the environment for attention. So there are external factors to it and there are internal factors to it. So let's explore the list of external factors first. This is size. Suppose there is an elephant and a rat. So obviously first you will notice elephant, and in case you still have curiosity that there is something around elephant, then you might notice mouse. So size matters a lot in perception selection. Okay, then we say intensity. Intensity would be like if you see someone with red hairs, oh, that would be a great thing. Everybody will be attracted to that specific person. Okay, so intensity can be a bright colors, they can be the intensity of light, or that can be, a whispering, or might be yelling. Okay, anything that is very different and that you can point out very easily. Then there are repetitions. Okay, suppose if I'm repeating something again and again, then you'll definitely notice it. And the teacher always has a habit, repeat some important things or sentence or some kind of a things which they want special attention from student side. They keep on repeating it. Okay, so status. Then status would be like high status, high profile people have always grabbed our attention very clearly. Right now in news, the Karnataka state government elections that's happening. Okay, so we can see the BJP versus Congress scenario. So both are very high profile parties in our country. So that has grabbed the attention of whole country and media as well. Sonam Kapoor's wedding, that was again in the media. Okay, so this is how the status reflects the attention or selectivity. Then contrast. Contrast would be like something which is contrasting. So right now if my background is white and I'm wearing something very dark like black or something like that, so that is being highlighted very easily. So this is contrast. Or to give you an example would be like if you're watching a movie and there is an exit written with LED lights and it's in red in color. Okay, so that is again a contrast. Then movement. If an object shows or express some kind of motion, okay, or people is moving. So suppose if I start moving here and there, then you will also start noticing more towards me. Okay, so your attention would be more towards me. So it's something like that. Okay, then there is a novelty, or you can say familiarity. So if I know that the situation or this person is very familiar to me, okay, so I'll have my attention towards that specific person or situation. Then nature. Okay, so by nature, actually, we are trying to say that, how the object is. Like the object is visual or it's just audio, or whether it involves some kind of picture, video clippings or audio clippings or something like that. Different kind of voices or different kind of musical instruments have been used. So, the nature. Okay, so what are these external factors? How they help you guys to have perceptual selectivity. Now we move on to internal factors. So when I talk about internal factors, we have first thing that is learning. Okay, so when I say learning, so we know how learning takes place. Like if I have an interest, then I learn some concept. If I don't have interest, but it has just been forced on me that if you do it, then you'll get something like that. So reward or motivations are related to some kind of a learning, then I'll do it. So there are various forms of learning, but we always associate learning with a cognitive awareness. So by which we basically want that our mind are organizing the information and they are trying to understand some kind of a concept and try to correlate it in future. So that is all about learning. Then motivation. Yes, of course, motivation is the thing that helps us to actually perceive things correctly or wrongly. Okay, so suppose I have very positive feeling about, gaining some good position, or I'm very ambitious about it. So I'll make sure my networking is very strong. I make sure that I always, take advantage of some kind of opportunity that are beneficial to me. So something like that I'll keep on working for. Okay, so that would be the motivation. Or to give you a small good example would be if I'm hungry, so the foodie things or the smell of the food just attracts me a lot. So personality, yes, personality is also very important as far as perceptual selectivity is concerned. Suppose old senior executive or manager is there. So he'll always keep on taunting this young generation managers or employees or junior executive, because he or she wants to express the maturity they are carrying. When it talks about younger generation, they would be more enthusiastic, more aggressive in their approach, very, very, very fast actually. Okay, so this is how the perception differs in such case when your personality is very different. Then I talk about perceptual organization. So once you're done with your internal and external factor for selectivity, then you move on to organizing the things. So the stimuli which you have received and the stimuli or the things which you have noticed and you have selected specifically, to have, or you're going to make perception about them, you'll start organizing them. So basically how a person organizes things, it would be based on figure and ground. This is a very favorite example in our perception. What happens is when you have a white paper and you're writing it with a blue pen or a black pen, so it gets easily noticed because there is a contrast in the background as well as your the color of pen that you're using for writing something. Okay, so that is a figure and ground. We generally use some kind of a figure that has a black background and a white different image. So somebody is perceiving that white image. Then somebody will notice that this is a white background and there is a black image on it, a shadow kind of image. So this is how also the perception differs on the basis of figure and ground. Then we talk about perceptual grouping. So grouping means you're trying to craft individual stimuli into meaningful patterns. So suppose I am dealing with some kind of a geometrical shape. So I know they belong to square, rectangles, triangles or circles are present. So I'll say this should clubbed under geometrical shapes. If there are certain drawing patterns or waves or something like that, that would be my patterns. So something like that. Okay. Then perceptual constancy. Constancy means you're trying to stabilize the situation. You're not in hush-hush or you're not just unsteady while perceiving something. Okay, so it means that you're trying to maintain some kind of a stability when you are actually perceiving things. Then we have perceptual interpretation. Okay, so when I talk about perceptual interpretation, it's an integral part of the perception process. Okay, so without interpretation, the selection and organization is just making no sense. Okay, so after the information has been received in the form of stimuli, then you have selected the important information as per your relevance, and then you try to organize it, and then finally you try to interpretate it. Then there is another step, that is checking. Once you interpret some information, you always try to check that information, whether by your own understanding or whether you try to take opinion of somebody else that you are right or wrong. Then we talk about reacting. And finally, once you're done with checking, you react on that specific object, person or situation, whatever thing you're basically perceiving. Then the outputs are there. Okay, so perceptual output would be the individual behavior towards that specific object. So right now, if I have to give you example, then like how you're perceiving me right now. Okay, would be an example. So the output would be either you're listening to me or the output would be you're not listening to me at all. Or maybe you must have headphones in your ears but still you're doing something on your laptop. Okay, so depends on your preference, or you have a meeting or something like that, so you might have not enough time, or you don't have that kind of right now the slot available to get login into the app. So this is how the perceptual outputs are there based on the different environmental stimuli. Okay, but this output gets affected with various factors. So that's we termed it as barriers. Okay. Then the factors that influence our perception. There are three categories of the factors. First is the characteristics of the perceiver, the person who is going to make a perception. Then perceived thing, object or a person, that would be my target. So the characteristics of that specific thing. Then the setting. Okay, so the characteristic of situation basically. So when I talk about characteristics of perceiver, there are needs and motives. There are self-concept of an individual. So when I talk about needs and motives, I given you example. If I'm hungry since 24 hours, then anything, is there close to me. First perception would be in my mind, oh God, please, that would be some kind of a foodstuff. Okay, that is tasty or not tasty, that's fine, but I'm hungry since 24 hours. So this is my motive, this is my need. So this is how I try to perceive things around me. If some picture is there or some object is kept, I don't know what it is right now, okay, but I'll try to guess it, okay, oh please, it could be the food first, okay, and in case it's not a food, okay, then I'll try to perceive it as the way it is. Or suppose I have some kind of a blurred picture in front of me, so I'll always try to judge it like, okay, it would be something related to food or something like that, because I'm hungry. So this is the way. Then self-concept would be how a person perceives himself or herself, which in turn influence his or her perception. So if I perceive myself as very positive, so I know it is very positive around me also. And if I'm meeting a people, with such kind of attitude or perception, then I'll have always a positive perception about such people around me, because I myself is very positive person. Then attitude, of course. Attitude is built upon perception. Attributes are there, your characteristics are there, personality traits are there, learning and your background is there. So the preference and likingness, they both affects the perception. Okay, so suppose if I'm a lecturer and I'm giving a lecture to a class of 100 students or 150 students. So, the more focus would be on the content instead of attending any kind of question and answer during the lecture time. Okay. And if there is a class of just 20 students, I know the more focus would be on question and answer session instead of, taking the content first. Then interest. Interest also matters a lot, because suppose if I have an interest in something, I'll try to focus my perception towards that thing. If I don't have interest in that thing, I'll never go and, select that object only for perception. Then past experiences. If I have very good past experiences linked to some kind of object, I'll always perceive things in that way. So suppose I have seen some kind of a flowers or the floral things around me. Okay, so I always feel if I smell some kind of a good fragrance, that there would be some kind of a presence of flowers or a good plants are there around me. So something like that. Okay, so that is a past experience. Then I talk about psychological or emotional state. So when an individual is in different emotion, okay, then that person's perception is very different as compared to in normal situation. So suppose if I am not right now motivated or happy enough, then that will get reflected in my lecture also. If I am content, satisfied, happy, that feeling is also expressed. So this is how my perception would be. Okay, so if I'm not in a good mood, my examples would be something like that. My lectures or content would be something like that, which will be very to the point, and a strict approach would be there instead of, a cool approach. Okay, then expectations is, of course, if I have some kind of expectation from some situation, object or person, my perception would be based on that or get influenced by such factors. New experiences. If I'm trying to experience or explore something very new which I have never done it, my perception would be completely different than in the case where I have some kind of a past experience. Okay, that you must have encountered. Then the personality characteristics. That means the person having very different characteristics or personality. So suppose if people try to, have a good perception about very energetic or sporty people. So if I see Virat Kohli, my first perception would be he's very sporty, right? Because he belongs to a sports field. So the personality and characteristics is influenced by the, background of that specific person. Okay. And when I see some other person, or you can see some other sportsman who's just playing kabaddi, it's state level or something like that, but the news have never flashed in TV or on TV or something like that, and I just see some person playing in a ground. I don't know whether he is a sports person or not, so I will have very different perception of about that person. Both the people belong to sports, they both are playing the sports, but the personality characteristics of a cricketer who has gained some kind of a popularity and the personality characteristic of a kabaddi player who haven't got any exposure yet, okay, would be very different in both the cases. Then the characteristics of target. Okay, so the very important or typical characteristics which we come across would be the color, the noise, the sound they make, or they are familiar objects, the bigger one, they are moving, or the appearances, the contrast, the background, everything will affect the characteristics of target. So first would be organization of a target. That means the various elements. If they are arranged in a proper manner, you will perceive them differently. And if the various elements of any object, they just scattered here and there, you will perceive them very differently. So if there is a puzzle, it is being linked properly in in their looks properly, you will perceive the complete image, and this is how you have to do it to complete it. And if the puzzles are scattered here and there, you don't know what it is all about. I'm sorry. Then figure and ground, again the same thing, what is there. So that is same applicable in the characteristics of target. Then proximity would be the something which is near to me and something which is far away from me. That means the distance of an object is all about proximity. That also affects my perception. Similarity, that how much I'm similar or how much I have encountered similar things, similar people. So my perception is very different when I'm encountering something different. So, if I meet some Indian people out here in a country, out of a country, everywhere I will perceive them warmly, friendly, at least communicating with a good attitude, because we belong to same nation. And in that case, if I encounter someone in America or Europe, some Chinese people or something like that, my perception would be very different, because I don't know actually the background of such people. Then closures. Closures would be how you try to complete the things. There are certain informations where the informations are in complete series. There is no missing gap in it. So you perceive it in a very different way. And there are the things or the data or the information that are being put forward to you, but there are the gaps in between. So you try to always fill those gaps based on your background, past experience and your educational background to perceive it in a meaningful way. Okay, so that is there. Characteristics of the situation would be like how the situation is. Suppose I am late for somebody's birthday party. So what will happen? So the person will say it's fine. Maybe she must have some professional or personal priorities. So still that host will serve me with a great smile and give me a good food in a party and obviously attend me properly. And in the same case, if I'm late for some kind of formal meeting, my manager will just scold me like anything. And if that is very important or a client meeting, then I'm dead. Okay, like this is how it is. So the location, the situation actually affects the perception. Even though I would have been genuine reason, but the priority of the situation would be the formal one. So I'm supposed to be before time, like that. Then what are the barriers actually in perceptual accuracy? Okay, so when I talk about barriers in perceptual accuracy, there are different stereotypes are there that assign. That means, okay, the first barrier would be stereotype that tries to assign attributes commonly associated with group to an individual. So suppose if I see some kind of a tribal people, so I know they don't have proper communication skills like we have, or they have a communication skills but we are unable to decode them, and in the same way, they are unable to decode our communication skills. So what will happen? If I see someone with such kind of attire, I'll say, okay, oh God, this is something a tribal person. Without even knowing that person might be good in education, having a great communication skill, but might be participating in some kind of a fancy dress competition. But my first perception would be on the attire. Okay, so that is kind of a stereotype. Halo effect is like you're using one attribute to develop an overall impression. So that we generally call as your first impression is the last impression, something like that. So what happens is in a first impression or one impression would be, suppose I'm very good to one person. So that person will perceive me as a very good person. But might be in different situation, I'll act as a bad person to that specific same person who has perceived me as a good person. So this is what the halo effect is. Selective perception is another barrier, that is the tendency to define the problems from one's own point of view. That means this is my perception. So if I have perception or I have my own point of view, like I feel like democracy is being basically not followed in our country properly, because we see so many ups and downs in our politics. Okay, this is my own perception. Okay, maybe there would be great things that's happening in our politics, but as you know, we don't know the reality behind the scenes, so we will just say that this is not good. Okay, so projection is in another barrier that assign personal attributes to other individual. That means if I'm good and I'll say, okay, this person is a good. He is with spectacles, I'm with spectacles. That's the reason we are good. Okay, so something like that is a projection. A contrast effects would be when the meaning of something that takes place is based on contrast with another recent event or situation. Then self-prophecy is there, another barrier, that is creating or finding in a situation that which you expected to find in the first place. Okay, that means you try to figuring out something in the first place, and if you figure out that thing, you will have that kind of perception. If you don't figure out something like you were expecting, so you will not have that kind of perception. So self-fulfilling prophecy is based on your expectation. So I feel like all students should be sincere. That should not be the case. Some would be naughty, some would be distracting, some would be not interested, some would be more interested. Some are questionnaire. Okay, they just need to have asked more and more questions when the session is going on. So something like that. Then how we can enhance our perceptual skills. Okay, so when I talk about enhancing the perceptual skills would be knowing oneself very accurately. Okay, so you know, if you know yourself very accurately, then you will perceive the things properly based on your interpretation skills. Okay, so that is very important. So first you need to be aware of your own self. So when you talk about organization behavior, we have so many methods to understand oneself. SWOT analysis, we use it. We use Zohari window also, you know. So that is how the things are. Then empathize with others. It's very important that you should understand others person's condition, others person's characteristics, attitude before actually perceiving certain things. So you need to empathize always with others. You don't need to jump on the conclusions very easily. Okay, then you should have very positive attitude. Okay, positive attitude is something we demand generally, or we always advise people to have it in their day-to-day life. But what is positivity? So suppose right now, if we are having a discussion, and if the bandwidth or might be the internet gets affected, so it would be that we are coming back again and rescheduling the session, and we are starting the session with a fresh new discussions or explanation. That would be a great time. So something like that. Okay, then postpone impression formation. So when I talk about postpone impression formation, it would be that you should not be in hurry to have perception about someone. The reason would be very simple, that suppose if I judge someone in present situation and that person is actually contrast to this, what I have perceived him. Suppose I have a very old teacher, so I perceive that person as he's very rude or strict because the first lecture he behaved very rudely and strictly with us. But you know, when I see him in a staff room and he's laughing, he's cracking jokes with the students and he's very approachable person, then again my perception is changed. So I should take my time before actually, you know, concluding something about someone. So we should take time before making a perception. Then communicating very openly. It's very important that we should communicate very openly to any person or about any object if we are able to have perception about that specific thing or the person. If you don't have proper information or stimuli about that specific thing, situation or person, then how are you going to interpret that person? Then comparing one perception with that of others. That means you always try to compare the perception that you have formed with somebody else's perception, so that you're assured that whatever you have in your mind, whatever things you have perceived it, is proper. So this is how the perception process takes place. This is how the barriers are. This is how we actually do it. Okay. I'm so sorry for this. Okay, now the next thing in perception is that why it is so important to, go through this all fundamental or formal procedure of perception in an organization behavior. When I talk about organization behavior, it's all about human being. How they're behaving in organizational settings. So when I talk about organizational settings, it will be code of conduct, rules and regulation, formal relationship, authority and responsibility chain, the communication channels would be there, team handling is there, pressure is there, conflict is there, issues are there, industrial relations are there, top management strategies are there, rules and regulation laws are there, taxations are there, then you have to work in a budget. See, there are so many things when I talk about organizational settings. And then I talk about an individual that is also coming with a lot of baggage with himself or herself at organizational setting. You have educational background, you have a cultural background, you have certain kind of values, you have some kind of expectations, aspirations and everything. So your behavior is very different in an organizational setting. So for an HR manager, it is very important to perceive you as an individual, as an employee, as an asset, or as an HR capital in a very, very true way. The reason is being that suppose if you have been placed at very important place, or you are handling some kind of very important role where you have an interaction with a client, then they are very clear that this person is going to handle the situation very nicely if your perception is like that. And if your perception is that you're very reserved, you're very isolated, you don't like to speak to person, then we don't give you the client interaction at all. Or we'll try to improve that skill. So, it helps a lot to me when I'm placing an employee as an HR manager. It helps me a lot in a selection procedure, that what are the demands of my job description and what this person is coming with. So perception helps a lot for that thing. Then if I understand a person properly, or if I have a proper perception about a person, then in a case of conflict also, in case there are ups and downs in a career also, I know as an HR manager how I have to support that specific employee, or how I have to guide him or her, and how I have to take him out of that specific situation, or I have to make him understand right now where he or she is going wrong. This is also very important. It's very important to highlight to an employee that, boss, right now you're very wrong. Okay, so that you can do it in a proper way when you are very clear with it. Okay, so the perception helps in that also. Then a properly perception would also help to implement the changes in an organization. So when we see there are lots of positive attitude people working around us, they easily understand and cooperate for the things, they have a trust in us, and they have that kind of attitude which we are looking out from them. So they will able to contribute in tough times. So when you talk about recession, when there were layoffs, there were certain organizations who were not paying to their employees, but the employees are very happy to stick to that specific organization without withdrawing any kind of salary. The reason was the trust. The reason was the perception in a both way. Okay. When you talk about commitment or loyalty of an employee, so again, a perception plays a very important role. So, when I talk about loyalty, then if a person has perceived us in a proper way, and if we have perceived that person in a proper way, we have a proper channel of career growth plans, and we know how that person will grow with us as an organization or in a department. And the person will also have the same clarity from that our side as well. So that will also help to achieve the loyalty of that specific person. It also helps to decrease the attrition rate. It also helps to channelize the information properly in the team. So because I know if the leader or the senior person is not perceived as a leader in a team, and I know who is perceived as a leader in a team, okay, they are both different definition, leader and a senior. Okay, so I know how my information is supposed to be communicated and through which channel. This is also in the smartness that HR manager has always, and that comes from the perception. Okay, so perception helps in so many functions. You talk about customer relation, you talk about internal organizational values, or you talk about implementing any kind of changes. So it has a great impact on each and every organization process. Thank you.